Hello there everyone, and welcome to the Craft Your Life Project Kit Lush Garden layering video. So to start with, I'm going to start with the stamp set, and I'm going to start with the largest of the flowers from the stamp set. All I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp the outline first, and I'm going to be using some obsidian black for this. I'm then going to take the first layer and I'm just going to pop this within the outline. So this is going to fit directly with the outline that we've just stamped with the black ink. The points I'm going to be layering up on here are the bottom, the right over on the corner, and then the left side as well. So for this layer, I'm going to be using the pink diamond ink. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to ink up that layer and then I'm going to pop that back into place, making sure that it fits within the outline. Again, lining up that bottom petal first and then the left and the right sides as well. I'm then going to take the second layer, and again I'm lining up this bottom part here. You can see that it's going to add the darker shadows to the base of the petals. For this one I'm using the Pinkalicious ink. So again, as before, I'm going to ink that up and then pop that back into place, making sure that it's nicely stamped and then press down. Once I've done that, I can then move on to the third layer, and this is going to add even more deeper shadows to the base of those bottom petals that you can see and just above the flower center. For this one, I'm going to be using the Rubellite ink, so I'm just going to ink that up and then pop that back into place, making sure that everything lines up really nicely. Once I've done that, I'm going to move on to the flower center for this one, and I'm going to be using the base, and I'm going to be using the pumpkin pie ink, and it fits perfectly within that flower center. I'm then going to move on to the yellow ochre for the second layer and just again pop that into place. I'm then going to move on to the smaller flower. Again, for the outline, I'm going to be using the obsidian black or whatever black ink that you do have. I'm then going to take the base layer for this one, and again, as before, going to fit directly within that outline that we've just stamped. I'm going to use the same ink as I used for the first flower, so this one is the pink diamond, just to add that base layer. Again, just making sure that it's nicely stamped within that outline. I'm then going to take the second layer for this one, and I'm going to be lining up the top and the bottom edges of this flower here. For this one, I'm going to be using the Pinkalicious ink to add the darker shadows to this one. So I'm just going to ink that one up and then pop that one into place. For the flower centers, I'm going to be using the pumpkin pie again, and this is just going to stamp directly within that center, and then the yellow ochre for the second layer. I'm then going to move on to the leaves. So as before, for the outline, I'm going to be using the obsidian ink, and then the first layer for this leaf is going to fit directly within that outline. I'm going to be using the firefly ink for this one, a really beautiful light green ink color, and I'm just going to stamp that into place, lining up the base and the tip of the leaf. I'm then going to take the second layer for this leaf, and it is just going to line up along that bottom edge that you can see at the base. For this one, I'm going to be using the fresh leaf ink, so I'm just going to stamp that one down there. I'm then going to move on to the smaller leaf. So for the outline, I'm going to be using the obsidian. I'm then going to take the base layer, and this is going to line up along that bottom edge where the base of the leaf would be. For this one, I'm going to be using the lime, so I'm just going to ink that one up and then stamp that into place, making sure that I line up that bottom edge of the leaf. I can then take the second layer, and again, this is going to line up along that bottom edge. And for this one, I'm going to be using the fresh leaf ink, so I can ink that one up and stamp that into place. And that is the stamp set layering done. I'm then going to move on to the simple colouring stencil. So these are really easy. These are going to add the base to the flowers and the leaves. So all you're going to need to do is kind of place these around the image. They will line up perfectly, and then add colour onto them. I use Frosty Pink for the flowers, and I'm going to be using Firefly for the leaves. Then we have a little cluster of flowers as well on the simple colouring stencil. So I'm going to do the base using some of the Mountain Mist. I'm going to move that over and line that up with the little guidelines that we have on the stencil. I'm going to be using the Volcano Lake for the second layer, and then the lagoon for the third layer. Again, making sure that I line up everything perfectly using the etch lines that are in fact on the stencil. So once I finish with this layer, I can then add the little flower centers in, and I'm going to be using the chamomile ink for that one there. I'm then going to move on to the layering stencil that we have for the embossing folder, which is very, very clever. So So I've embossed the image from the 3D embossing folder, and I'm then going to kind of lock the stencil into place. So this is the first one. I'm going to be using the lavender fields for the little flowers that you can see in the top right. And for the larger flowers that we have on the embossed image, I'm going to be using the Pinkalicious ink. So I'm just using a small blending tool for that. I'm also going to do some more of the larger flowers using the lavender fields. And for these bottom flowers, I'm going to be using the chamomile ink. I'm then going to move on to the second stencil. And again, I'm just going to lock that into place. So for the larger flowers, the ones that I've already done pink, I am going to be using Rubellite for the second layer on those. I can then move on to the second layer of the purple flowers, and for those I'm going to be using Deep Iris, and for the leaves I'm going to be using Lime. I can then switch the stencil over, just kind of moving it, shifting it a little bit, just to add those more smaller flowers in the bottom using the chamomile ink. Once that's done, I can then move on to the third stencil. Now this is going to take a little bit more moving around. So for the larger flowers, I am going to be using the razzleberry ink. I can then smooth the stencil over again to colour in the leaves, this time using the lime ink again. Then I'm going to move on to the purple flowers, and for these I am going to be using the Midnight Violet ink. And then for the flower centres, I'm going to be using some pumpkin pie ink, which is very, very pretty. So once the flower centres have been done, I'm then going to shift the stencil over again just to do this darkest leaf, and I'm going to be using the fresh leaf ink for that. And there is all of the layering complete for the whole of the project kit. We really do hope that this video helps, and thank you so much for watching. See you again soon. Bye bye.